of course, I remember going to school with, I remember who my first grade teacher was, Mrs. Amundsen. And I remember that this was during the flu, and we had to wear masks every day to school. And then at night the teacher would collect them and burn them, and then we'd get a new mask the next day. So I remember that. And, oh.
Were you living right across from the school at that time? Were you living in the house right across?
We lived across from the school at that time. But we had lived down where our barn is. I don't know the street number and things. Okay. But we lived in a kind of a little house down there. It wasn't too much. And I remember electricity must have come in because we had one bulb hanging from the ceiling, the only light we had. And I don't know why that makes such an impression on me, but that's what I remember, is that light fixture.
Okay.
Were you speaking Norwegian when you started first grade?
No, I never did, but I understood it. I understood everything my parents said, and I could talk Norwegian, but I never did. But
you spoke English, yeah.
But you knew Norwegian pretty well, because when you came out to the farm to visit with those Norwegians, you were giving me a bunch of directions, and you were looking at me and got kind of upset. And I had to tell you, I said, Mother, I said, you're speaking Norwegian, because you kicked back into Norwegian because those folks were there, and then when I showed up, you just kept right on, and then you got upset with me because I didn't understand you.
You know, our schoolhouse burned. That was on a Friday night. I don't remember the year, but
I think it's 1924.
1924.
Yeah.
I was up
night
at
of Christmas vacation starting.
Yeah.
I think.
I was up at Grandma's. Like when Friday came, I think she wanted to get rid of one of us kids because there was so much commotion around the house. Well, they didn't all like Grandma, I'm sorry to say, but I did. And I always volunteered to be the one to go to Grandma's on Friday night. So that's where I was. When in the night at 4 o'clock, my mother called. And she said, the schoolhouse is burning. And Juliet better come home and see this. So at 4 o'clock on that winter night, I got up and I walked home. And of course, I saw the flames from Grandma's house and all the way to the school.
That's when she was living east in Spring Grove where Arthur lived?
Yes.
Is that
next to the Flatiger house.
Yeah, right next to the Flatiger house, yeah. And your uncle, our grandfather Christian, I think he was on the roof, and I think he got pulled off the roof and landed in a big snowbank. He was on a hose, and the hydrant was frozen, and so they were moving to the other hydrant, and he was hanging on to the fire hose, and as they moved to the other hydrant, he got pulled off, and he landed in the snowbank, and fortunately he didn't get hurt.
I think he had a fur coat on too, possibly.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe helped break his fall, but then in the snowbank.
And snow, maybe. Talking falling out, I can remember Uncle Willie and Auntie Lily were out driving. Willie had that 33th airplane, and the doors open to the front. While they were driving down the road, and Auntie Lily had her coat in the door. So she opened the door to, and the doors opened. They're suicide doors, they called them.
Yeah.
And down the bank she went, but I guess she didn't get hurt, but that'd be an awful.
Fell out of the car.
Yeah.
It just kind of pulled her out, I
Yeah.
suppose, when she opened the door like that. Yeah. Yeah.
When I was playing the organ in Black Hammer, my sister Sylvia always went with me, and she was a good rider, and we rode 2 horses. Now, what were they?
Cora and Dewey.
Cora and Dewey, yeah. She rode Cora because Cora was a little more spirited than Dewey. But we went to church that Sunday, and then we were on our way home, and we were up by the cemetery, just ready to drive down into Spring Grove. And a car came along and honked the horn. Well, these horses had not heard a car horn, and my horse took off. down, well, down through Main Street, actually. And my horse didn't stop until it came out to your farm out there on the highway. And my sister's horse was coming behind me. And when we went through Spring Grove, at that time there were benches. It was a Sunday afternoon about 2 o'clock, and the guys were sitting on the benches looking at us, wondering what were those crazy girls doing.
What were the Lee girls doing? You know.
You mentioned the flu epidemic, or somebody did. At that time, that was the year I was born, 1918, when that great flu problem existed, and they closed the church, along with, I suppose, the schools temporarily. And I was to be baptized, but I couldn't be baptized in the church because it was closed. Oh. So the minister, I think Reverend Johnson,
would be,
came to our home, and of course my mother had to find a bowl for the water. So she found her very best, beautiful, I guess it would be, you would call it a fruit bowl or something like that. And she gave it to me after when I grew up. She said, well, you know, we use this for your baptism, so you should have it. And so when each of my sons, the 4 sons, were baptized, wherever they were, in church or at home, we used, I asked the pastor, could we use this bowl, and they were always happy to do it.
Yeah.
And then we started with the 10 grandchildren, and so they all were interested in continuing this tradition. And it's been to a church in West Virginia, and in Minneapolis there were 2 granddaughters from the 2 different families who were baptized, and at that point, that was a Catholic church, and so they had a big stone baptism font, and this priest took that bowl and went like that to put the water on the kid's head, and I thought, oh, please don't slam it into the stone.
Oh, yeah.
I speak like the people from Valdez because I roll my R's. That's what I was told when I was over there. Oh, they said, you must have been born over here, and because you could talk Norwegian pretty good. And they said, well, they figured I was, but no, I guess I must have just taken that accent, yeah.
So Norwegian was spoken.
Oh yes, we spoke Norwegian a lot. And another thing I should tell about my great-grandfather, this Johannes Glasrud, when he was about 50 years old, then his one brother that had moved to Blackhammer, and that would be Matilda's father then, he was building a barn, or had started it, and then he got cancer. So then, and he died, but then the widow still wanted to keep farming. She had several children, and my great-grandfather was there helping when they were doing the barn raising, they call it, and he fell off a beam, and he was killed. He fell on his head, I guess, and so he died at 50 years of age.
Wow.
Yeah, and then, so that was sad.
And this was your
my great-grandfather, yes.
Okay. So
yeah, and he was the son of this Christian. And
okay. So what did your great-grandmother do? She had kids?
Well, she still kept farming.
Okay, wow.
yeah, I guess that's kind of all they knew back then, you know, was to farm. And if you had some land then, you tried to stay on it, so. Yeah.
Do you know if they had cows or?
Oh yes, they always had milking, and mostly, well, a few hogs. They had just a little bit of everything. Maybe a few chickens, so you had your own eggs. And oh yeah, that was another funny thing about my grandfather Hogsted, that he was married to, his wife was the Glasrud then, Inger Maria, and she always had to do the milking because he didn't like to be around and do that. So they said one time I think she had just had a baby or something, and then so he was supposed to milk, and they said you had gloves on, and of course the cow didn't like that, so she kicked, I guess pretty bad. But yeah, my grandmother was a very hard-working lady, had a large garden, and I don't know, I don't think she did field work, but she, you know, she raised a big family, so I know she had to work hard.
Shall I speak in Norwegian?
Go ahead.
Yeah, there you go.
I think you should tell the Norwegian about
Okay.
Christian riding the horse.
Okay.
Ja, denne historien vet jeg ikke om er sann, men det første vi hørte om en Christian Glasrud, vi ante ikke at han hadde reist til Amerika, men vi hørte om at det hadde bodd en kar her, og han hadde prøvd å ri opp i etasjen her med hest. Og jeg tar en nabo bort på her, og han sa, ja, det har jeg hørt, sa han. Han kjørte inn med spisla, det er en liten slave vi har, som kjørte inn her, og så prøvde han, spente en tur der, og så prøvde han å ri opp troppa. Troppa var ikke her som det er nå, men det er i den samme gangen, så, men om det måtte vel være mindre hester den gangen, enn de er nå, små. Jeg kan jo prøve å si det på engelsk, men jeg tror ikke jeg klarer å, not so good and speak in English, so I have a bit problem there.
That's great. That's wonderful.
Do they think he actually got all the way upstairs with the horse?
So what you said was
Christian.
Christian.
Stop there, so no,
Okay.
came out.